بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I welcome you all to this first session of ours in which we will try to explain the introduction of Matn Abu Shujaa, which is a beginner level text in the Shafi'i Madhab. And I have started this series mainly so that it can help me revise what I have studied. And inshallah ta'ala, through this, people can also benefit and they can study the Shafi'i Madhab bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Before we start reading the text, it is important to mention a few muqaddimat, a few introductory points. The ulama, they have a habit when it comes to teaching a particular text or a particular matn or a particular fan, i.e. subject. They start off by mentioning the Mabadi' al-Ashara of that subject. The Mabadi' al-Ashara are the 10 fundamental pieces of information about a particular subject that you need to know in order for you to understand what that subject is and what it is about and how it relates to other subjects. And this is something that is very important. The ulum al-shar'iyyah, the Islamic sciences, they are like one body. And the ulama only separated the different aspects of ulum al-shar'iyyah and called them with different names to make it easy for us to study them. Otherwise, this is one religion, the religion of al-Islam. But we have different subjects: aqidah, fiqh, tafsir, hadith, usul al-fiqh, ulum al-lughah, nahu, sarf, balagha, so on and so forth, so that it becomes easy for us to study the ulum al-shar'iyyah, to study al-Islam. So we study one subject at a time, or we study things one by one in a proper order. Naam. So it's important for us to understand the 10 fundamental introductory points about any particular subject that we study. If you're studying fiqh, you need to know the Mabadi' al-Ashara of fiqh. If you're studying tafsir, you need to know the Mabadi' al-Ashara of tafsir. What are the Mabadi' al-Ashara? As I have explained, they are 10 fundamental introductory pieces of information about that subject, which tell you what this subject is, what is it about, and they give you some information about this subject. What are these 10 points? Al-Imam al-Sabban, rahimahullah, in his hashiyah on the sharh of al-Ushmuni on al-Fiqh ibn Malik, al-Sabban, he writes in his hashiyah a few lines of poetry in which he mentions these 10 introductory points. He says, إن مبادئ كل فن عشرة الحد والموضوع ثم الثمرة ونسبة وفضله والواضع والاسم الاستمداد حكم الشارع مسائل والبعض بالبعض اكتفى ومن درى الجميع حاز الشرف. So he says إن مبادئ كل فن عشرة. إن مبادئ كل فن عشرة. The fundamental points of every fan, every subject are 10. The first point, al-had. Al-had means التعريف or the definition. So the first thing we want to know about this science is what is the definition of this science. When we say fiqh, what is the definition of fiqh? If you're saying usul al-fiqh, what is the definition of usul al-fiqh? If you're saying tafsir, what is the definition of tafsir? And so on and so forth. Al-hadd wal-mawdu'. Mawdu' means the subject matter which is studied, the main subject matter which is studied in this fan. What is this fan? What is this subject about? For example, medicine. What is medicine about? It's a study of the human body from the perspective of different diseases and their cures, right? So fiqh, what is the main subject matter of fiqh? What is the main subject matter of tafsir? That's called al-mawdu'. So number one, we have the definition, which is called al-had. Number two, we have al-mawdu', the main subject matter of that field, of that fan, of that science. Al-had wal-mawdu' thumma al-thamara. Al-thamara is the benefit that you get. Thamara literally translates to fruit. The fruits that you get from studying this subject. What are the fruits that you get? What are the benefits that you get from studying this subject? Right, that's number three. Number four, وَفَضْلُهُ وَنِسْبَةٌ وَالْوَاضِعُ. وَفَضْلُهُ, the virtue of this subject. How virtuous is this subject? وَنِسْبَةٌ, نِسْبَةٌ, أي the relationship of this subject to other subjects, or the relationship between this science and the other sciences. وفضله ونسبة والواضع. واضع, al-wadi' is the first person who wrote a book on this fun, or if not a book, the first person, to pen down this subject. And then he says, وفضله ونسبة والواضع والاسم الاستمداد حكم الشارع. Al-ism, what are the different names that this subject is known by? Because there are oftentimes you find that there's one subject, but it has multiple names. So the different names that this subject is known by. وَالِاسْمُ الْإِسْتِمْدَادُ. Istimdad means where is this subject taken from? What are the sources of this subject? Where is this subject? Where is the material of this subject? The masail of this subject, where are they taken from? Istimdad حكم الشارع. حكم الشارع means what is the shari'i hukum of studying this subject? Is it wajib? If it's wajib, is it wajib aini or wajib kifai? Wajib aini is that wajib which is obligatory on every single individual. Wajib kifai is a communal obligation. Or is the subject haram to study, and so on and so forth. حكم الشارع. Then he says masailun. Masail, what are the different singular topics that are studied in this subject? The different topics that are studied in this subject. So overall you have 10 fundamental points about every subject that you need to know. The first one is al-had, definition, the definition of that subject. Number two, al-mawdu', the subject matter. Number three, al-thamara, the benefit of studying that subject. Number four, fadl, the virtue of studying the subject. Nisbatu, the relationship between the subject and the other sciences. 5. Number 6, wadi', the first person to write on the subject. Ism, the number 7, the different names of the subject. Istimdad, number 8, where is the subject taken from? Hukm al-shari', the shari'i hukum of studying the subject. 9, and then number 10, masail, the different topics that are studied in this subject. Right? So let's start. So we're studying fiqh. We're studying fiqh. Matn Abu Shujaa it's a fiqhi text on the Madhab of Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah. But so that's the text that we are studying, but the subject that we are studying is fiqh. So what is fiqh? Fiqh linguistically means al-fahm, understanding. Understanding. That is what it means linguistically. However, what does it mean technically? When the scholars of fiqh, when the fuqaha, when they say fiqh, what do they mean? Are they using fiqh in the linguistic sense just to mean fahm, understanding? Or do they mean something else? They mean something else. The technical definition is usually related to the linguistic definition, but it tends to be different. Right? For example, nahu, the word nahu, technically it means syntax, a part of Arabic grammar. But from a linguistic perspective, it has different meanings. It has different meanings, right? It can mean direction, amongst other things, linguistically. But technically, when the scholars of nahu, when the scholars of Arabic language, when they say nahu, what do they mean? They mean the science of Arabic syntax, which is a part of Arabic grammar. So fiqh, linguistically, it means al-fahm, but technically, what does it mean? Technically, it means al-ilmu bil-ahkam al-shar'iyyah al-amaliyah al-muktasabah min adillatiha al-tafsiliyah. Alright, let's break down the definition. Fiqh is the study of amali shar'i ahkam. Amali shar'i ahkam, meaning the rulings, the laws of the sharia that have to do with our bodily actions, the actions that we do with our bodies, our bodily actions. So the laws in the sharia which are connected with, or which have to do with our bodily actions. Al-muktasabah min adillatiha al-tafsiliyah, and these laws, they are deduced from their tafsili evidences, meaning the ayat of the Quran and the ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the specific ayat, the specific ahadith from which we deduce the ahkam al-shar'iyyah. If we use a qiyas or ijma', these are all considered tafsili evidences, adillah tafsiliyah. And when we study Usul al-Fiqh, we'll talk in more detail about what does tafsili evidence mean, right? And so on and so forth. So that's the definition of fiqh. طيب. That's point number one. Now you know what the study of fiqh is about. It is specific to the laws that are related to our bodily actions. Prayer, it's a bodily action. Making wudu, it's a bodily action. And so on and so forth. Al-mawdu'. Mawdu', what is the subject matter of fiqh? It is al-ahkam al-shar'iyyah, al-amaliyah. The rulings related to our bodily actions. That is the subject matter of fiqh. That is what fiqh studies. Thamara. What are the benefits of studying fiqh? There are many. Number one, that in order to enter Jannah, we need to believe in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked us to believe. That's aqidah. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات, and they do good deeds. So fiqh tells us about what obligatory and what supererogatory recommended deeds we need to do. And so if someone follows the guidelines of fiqh properly, inshallah ta'ala, with the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open the gates of Jannah for them, because they will be fulfilling the requirements of Islam. That's number one. Number two, the study of fiqh can help you become a faqih. And as a faqih, you can solve the problems of the ummah. In every age, the ummah faces new problems, new questions arise. And in every age, we need fuqaha. And so only those who study fiqh can properly become fuqaha. So these are the benefits that you get from studying fiqh. Through fiqh, you also realize how the ayat and ahadith, how the ulama have interpreted the ayat and ahadith and deduced ahkam from them. When you get to see this in more advanced books of fiqh. Yes. So that's the thamara. Nisbah, the relationship of fiqh to other ulum, is that fiqh is from ulum al-shar'iyyah. It's from the shar'i sciences, amongst the aqidah and others, and it's from ulum al-maqasid. Because shar'i sciences, ulum al-shar'iyyah, are of two types, ulum al-ala and ulum al-maqasid. Ulum al-ala are those sciences which are instrumental sciences. These sciences are studied so that they lead us or they qualify us to be able to study tafsir, hadith, fiqh and aqidah. So sciences like nahu, sarf, mantiq, usul al-fiqh, usul al-hadith, these sciences, they give us the necessary qualification to be able to study tafsir and hadith and aqidah and fiqh. And the four sciences, tafsir, hadith, aqidah and fiqh, these are ulum al-maqasid. These are the sciences that we want to get to and that we want to master. Now, why? Because tafsir is the explanation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's kalam, the noble Quran, and hadith is the source of Islamic law. The Quran and the hadith, they are sources of Islamic law. And then aqidah are the points that have been deduced from the Quran and the Sunnah that are related to what a Muslim must believe in. And then fiqh are the points that have been deduced from the Quran and the Sunnah that Muslims need to follow. Fiqh is Islamic law. Now, al-Wadi' is the first person who wrote down a book of fiqh. So we have different ulama who have written down books of fiqh. Imam Abu Yusuf al-Qadi wrote down a book in fiqh, and Imam Malik, he actually compiled a book of hadith, but his book of hadith al-Muwatta is specific to fiqhi ahkam. And Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah, he compiled a book on fiqh, right? So these are ulama, or these are the earliest books of fiqh that have reached us. Na'am. Al-Wadi' al-Ism. Ism. What are the different names by which this science is known? So this science, it's known as fiqh. It's also known as ilmul furu'. Furu'ud-din. Furu' is the jama', the plural of far'. Far' is something that is deduced. Something that stands on a foundation. It's the opposite of asl. Asl means foundation. And far' is the thing that you build on the foundation. So why is fiqh called furu'ud-din or ilmul furu'? It's because it is deduced using usul al-fiqh. Usul al-fiqh. Usul al-fiqh is the foundation of fiqh, the principles of fiqh. They are used to deduce fiqh. So in relation to that, fiqh is called furu'ud-din or ilmul furu' or furu' fiqhiyya. These are all names of one science, right? And usul al-fiqh, that's a different science. Those are the principles of fiqh, the principles that are used to deduce fiqhi rulings. That's a different subject. Now, istimdad, where is fiqh taken from? It is taken from the sources of Islamic law. The primary sources are Quran and Sunnah, and then you have ijma', qiyas, These are the four sources upon which everyone agrees. And then there are some other sources on which there's a difference of opinion. So you have Shar'u man qablana, you have Amal Ahlul Medina, you have Istishab, Istihsan, Masalih Mursala, etc. Right? These are all sources from which we get fiqhi rulings. Hukm al-Shari', what is the Shari'i hukum of studying fiqh? Well, there are parts of fiqh which are wajib aini. Every single individual should study them. Such as fiqh al-ibadat. It's obligatory in everyone to know how to pray salah, how to make wudu, and so on and so forth. And then there are parts of fiqh which are fard kifaya, communal obligation. Every person doesn't need to know them. But there are certain people in the community, or enough people in the community that should know them. Such as the fiqh of business transactions and the fiqh of related to criminal laws called fiqh al-jinayat and so on and so forth. And masail, what are the masail that are studied in fiqh? What are the topics studied in fiqh? Fiqh has mainly four chapters mainly. You have fiqh al-ibadat, fiqh related to actions of worship, how to pray, how to fast, how to make wudu, how to make hajj, so on and so forth. Then you have fiqh al-usra, fiqh related to family matters. Fiqh related to family matters. The nikah, the topics related to nikah, the topics related to divorce, all of these are mentioned in fiqh al-usra. And then you have fiqh al-mu'amalat, fiqh related to dealings. So this includes business transactions, topics related to Islamic economics and so on and so forth, topics related to Islamic banking. All of this would be discussed in fiqh al-mu'amalat. And then you have fiqh al-jinayat, which is fiqh related to criminal laws. So you have four main chapters of fiqh. طيب. So this is an introduction. That is, these are the 10 introductory points that are important. And whatever fun you study, you should first try to seek out the 10 introductory points of that science. The definition of that science, the subject matter of that science, and so on and so forth. The second introduction that I want to give is that if someone wants to become a faqih and a serious student of knowledge, they should pick a madhab and they should study that madhab. They should pick a madhab and study that madhab. And the madhab is studied at different levels. So you have the beginner level, you have beginner level books, you have intermediate level books, you have advanced level books. And you can study the beginner level in English, but it's best that you study intermediate and advanced level fiqh in Arabic. Because the prerequisite of studying intermediate and advanced level fiqh is that you should know usul al-fiqh, principles of fiqh. And you cannot study usul al-fiqh unless you have studied Arabic. Unless you have studied Arabic. Now let us delve into the introduction of Matn Abu Shujaa or Matn Abi Shujaa. Matn Abi Shujaa is one of the most popular texts in the Shafi'i madhab. And there are ulama who have also written it in poetry form. We will not be studying the poetry form, we will be studying the prose, the nathr, the original version of it. But it's so popular that some ulama, they have converted it into a poetic form. And there are many explanations of it. You have the explanation of Ibn al-Qasim al-Ghazi, which is a very important explanation, Fathul Qarib al-Mujib. You have the explanation of al-Khatib al-Shirbini, it's called al-Iqna', also a very important explanation. It's considered a beginner level text. Usually the Shafi'is, they study one text before this, which is called Safinatun Najah. But if you study Matn Abi Shujaa, then you can read Safinatun Najah on your own. Matn Abu Shujaa is more comprehensive. It's more comprehensive. Now, let us start with the Matn. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة على سيدنا محمد النبي وآله الطاهرين وصحابته أجمعين. قال القاضي أبو شجاع أحمد بن الحسن ابن أحمد الأصفهاني رحمه الله تعالى. The author of the book, his kunya is Abu Shujaa. It is said that he lived for 160 years. Now, and he was a very knowledgeable person of his time, and he was from Basra, which is a city in modern day Iraq. And his name is Ahmad ibn al-Hasan ibn Ahmad al-Asfahani. Al-Asfahani. He was born in Basra. But his nisbah goes back to Isfahan. He was born in Basra. Now, he says in the introduction, سألني بعض الأصدقاء حفظهم الله تعالى أن أعمل مختصرا في الفقه على مذهب الإمام الشافعي رحمة الله عليه ورضوانه في غاية الاختصار ونهاية الإيجاز. He says, some of my friends, سألني بعض الأصدقاء, some of my friends have asked me. And then he makes a dua for them. He says, حفظهم الله تعالى, may Allah preserve them. And his friends, they deserve this dua, because if they had not asked him, we might have not had this blessed book. We would not have had this in front of us, and we would not have been studying it. And so you see how a simple question can lead to such things which get accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they become a sadaqah jariyah for you. There are many books that have resulted from simple questions, right? Or simple requests. Ibn al-Hajar also, when he writes Nukhbat al-Fiqh, he mentions that some of his friends, or he says ikhwah, brothers, they asked him to write it, and so he wrote Nukhbat al-Fiqh. And so Ibn Shujaa, or Abi Shujaa here, he was asked by some of his friends to write down this book, and he wrote it. He says, أن أعمل مختصرا, to write a concise book. A mukhtasar is a book ما قل ألفاظه وكثر معناه. It's a book which has few words but is rich in meaning. So those words are explained. And so you'll find that sometimes books are very short. They're very concise books. But the ulama, when they explain them, they write 2 or 3 volume explanations of them. Like Khatib al-Shirbini, he wrote the explanation of this very concise text in 2 volumes. So a mukhtasar, in technical terminology, it's a book which has few words, but it's rich in terms of its meaning. He says في غاية then he says على مذهب في الفقه على مذهب الإمام الشافعي. Al-Fiqh, let's stop with this word for a moment. We have discussed the linguistic and technical meaning of the word fiqh. And we said that the technical meaning is العلم بالأحكام الشرعية العملية المكتسبة من أدلتها التفصيلية. العلم بالأحكام. Ahkam, we translated that as rulings. The ulama, when they give a definition for ahkam, ahkam is the plural of hukum. Ahkam means rulings, and hukum means one ruling. They say, when they define hukum, they say خطاب الله المتعلق بأفعال المكلف. Say خطاب الله, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's speech. So this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's speech, khitab is, it's not directly translated as speech. Khitab is something that you say to another person. So when we're saying speech here, we don't mean kalamullah. Kalamullah is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's speech, which is one of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Here khitabullah, we mean something by which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses us. That is a better way to put it. That is a better way to put it. Khitabullah, it's something by which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses us. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses us through certain ayat of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses us through the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well, because the sunnah is wahi, it's revelation. So these are considered direct ways by which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses us. The Quran is the direct speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the hadith, they are the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but they are also wahi, they are also inspired by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then you have indirect ways of addressing, which include ijma' and qiyas. What is meant by this is that these are the sources of law in which you find the rulings. So khitabullah al-muta'allaq, this khitab of Allah, it's related to af'al al-mukallaf, the actions of the mukallaf. What is a mukallaf? The mukallaf is the one who is responsible. What do we mean by that? The ulama, they describe the mukallaf as any human being who is aqil, a rational human being. Number one, rational. Number two, baligh, has reached the age of puberty. غير ملجأ, someone who is not, someone who has control. Because mulja is someone, for example, who has been tied, and this person has no control, he can't do anything, he's not free. So for example, if someone is tied up and you throw, and this person is thrown at another person and the other person dies, is it this person's fault who was tied up? No, because he was tied up, he had no control, he didn't do it intentionally, right? Someone tied him up and threw him, right? So the ulama say غَيْرُ مُلْجَأ, someone who's not in a situation like that. You're free, you have control, you have a choice. So غَيْرُ مُلْجَأ is someone who has a choice. So a human being who's a Muslim, who is rational, who has reached the age of puberty and has choice. This is a person who's called mukallaf. He's a mukallaf. He's responsible. If he sins, if he does a bad action that is haram in the Sharia, he will be punished for it. If he does a good deed, he will be rewarded for it. That's the mukallaf. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's address, which is related to our actions, the actions of the mukallaf. And this khitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is of certain types. It is of certain types. This khitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is what the ulama of Usul al-Fiqh mention in the first chapters of Usul al-Fiqh. In this, they give you the categories of the ahkam. So if you open the Quran and the Sunnah, and you open the books of ijma' and the books of qiyas, you'll see that every single ruling that's in the Quran, that's in the Sunnah, that is in the books of ijma', the books of qiyas, they are of these types. They are either haram. Something can either be haram, something can be wajib, it's obligatory for you to do it, it's fard. Number 2, it can be mandub, recommended for you to do it. Mandub or mustahab, recommended. It's not wajib, but it's recommended. It's a good thing if you do it. You'll get ajr, you'll get thawab, you'll be rewarded. But if you don't do it, you won't get any sins. That's mandub or mustahab. And mubah is something in which you have a choice to do it or not to do it. It's not connected to punishment or reward. And then makruh is something that it's better if you don't do it. You'll get ajr, thawab, if you don't do it. But if you do it, you will not be punished. That's makruh. And haram is something that if you do it, you will be punished. These are called the 5 categories of ahkam, and they're called ahkam taklifiyah. Ahkam taklifiyah. Ahkam taklifiyah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's address to us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses us to the Quran and the Sunnah, also through ijma' and qiyas and other sources of Islamic law, the address that we get, right? Or if you say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses us through the Quran and the Sunnah, the rulings in the Quran and the Sunnah, they can be divided or they can be categorized in this way. All the rulings that are in there, they are categorized, they're either wajib, mustahab, mubah, makruh or haram. That's it. Salah, for example, is wajib. Eating the flesh of the swine is haram. Right? And so on and so forth. Then these are called ahkam taklifiyah. These are the categories of Islamic rulings. These are the categories of Islamic rulings. So an Islamic ruling can either be wajib, obligatory, or mustahab, recommended, or mubah, allowed, or makruh, discouraged, or haram, prohibited. It has to be one of those. All the rulings mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah, and all the rulings we get through ijma' and qiyas, and all the rulings that the fuqaha deduce from other sources, they will be of one of these types. And then we have some things that are called ahkam wad'iyyah. We call them ahkam wad'iyyah. And these are ahkam that are related to something being sahih, correct, or valid, or being batil, invalid. They are related to a ibadah or an action being valid or invalid. Right? So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made wudu a condition from the conditions of prayer. Salah is wajib, prayer is wajib. If you pray without wudu, is your salah valid or invalid? It's invalid. Why? Because you did not fulfill one of the conditions of salah, which is wudu. We call this shart, condition. It's from ahkam wad'iyyah. Also another example. You or someone urinated. Or someone is in a state of janabah, right? After having a wet dream and so on and so forth. They're in a state of janabah. Can they pray? If they pray, will their prayer be valid? No, it will be invalid. Why? Because there's a mani'. A mani' is an obstacle, something that stops you. Until you go and do ghusl, you can't pray. Your prayer will be invalid if you pray in the state of janabah. Okay. Another example, so now we have 2 ahkam wad'iyyah, shart and mani'. Number 3, sabab. Sabab is the cause of the hukum, the cause of the ruling. So for example, the time of prayer. If the time of prayer has not come and someone prays, is their prayer valid or invalid? It will be invalid if they pray before the time. Why? Because timing of the prayer, it's a sabab. The prayer becomes wajib on you once the time of it comes. If you pray before the time, the prayer is going to be invalid. These three are called ahkam wad'iyah. They are related to a ibadah being valid or invalid. So, whatever ibadah you're doing, you have to make sure that its asbab are there. All the conditions are complete. And there is no mani', there are no shari'i obstacles. If a ibadah is performed like that, then it will be valid. If a mani' is there, like janab, or in the case of women, if they're menstruating, can they pray? No, they can't. That menstruation is a mani' from salah. It's an obstacle. It's a shari'i mani'. A woman cannot pray when she's menstruating. If she prays while she's menstruating, her prayer will be invalid. Now, also, she needs to, or everyone needs to fulfill the conditions of the wudu, or sorry, the conditions of the ibadah. So the condition of salah, for example, is wudu. If you pray without wudu, salah is going to be invalid. If you pray with wudu and there is no mani', and the time of the salah has come, the sabab has entered, right? The cause is there now. The sabab is there. The sabab, which is the time in this case, the time has come. And you have done your wudu, and there's no mani', and then you pray, then your prayer is valid. If something is valid, we call it sahih. If something is invalid, we call it batil. So these are the 5 ahkam wad'iyah: sabab, shart, mani', sahih, batil. Let's take another example, nikah. One of the conditions of nikah, one of the shurut of nikah, is that the wali of the lady must agree to it. What if the wali doesn't agree to it? Nikah is batil, it's invalid. Why? Because the conditions were not fulfilled. If the conditions were fulfilled, the wali agrees to it, and the girl agrees to it, and there's no mani', and so on and so on, the nikah will be valid, it will be sahih. So these are called ahkam wad'iyah. They are related to an act being valid or invalid. And ahkam taklifiyah, they are categorization. They are categorizations of Islamic rulings. So the Shaykh says, في الفقه على مذهب الإمام الشافعي. Madhab means selected opinions, or it's actually ism makan. It actually means a place, right? The place where you go to. But it's used metaphorically to refer to a school or the selected opinions of a particular person. In this case, Madhab al-Shafi'i. And remember, the madhab only talks about those matters in which there is ikhtilaf. The madhab only talks about, or the madahib al-arba'a, the 4 madahib, they only talk about those matters in which there is ikhtilaf. If there is ijma' on something, then the madahib will not have different opinions on them, of course. We won't say the madhab of the Shafi'is or the madhab of Imam al-Shafi'i is that zina is haram. Zina is obviously haram, bil ijma'. So there's no question of madhab here. The question of madhab only comes in matters in which there is ikhtilaf, in which there is a difference of opinion. So Imam al-Shafi'i, he understood it this way. Imam Malik understood it this way. Imam Ahmad understood it this way. Only in matters where you have differences of opinion do we have the question of madhahib. Now, al-Shafi'i, he is Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i al-Muttalibi rahimahullah ta'ala. He's from the Atba' al-Tabi'een, from the students of Imam Malik. Now, he says في غاية الاختصار ونهاية الإيجاز. He's describing the book he's writing. That this book is the pinnacle of being concise and short and summarized. And he says ليقرب على المتعلم درسه, so that it will be closer, meaning it will be easier for the student to study it. ويسهل على المبتدئ حفظه, and it will be easy for a beginner student of knowledge to memorize it. So this book is also short so that it's easy to memorize, and I recommend you all to memorize it. وأن أكثر فيه من التقسيمات وحصر الخصال. And he said, and also so that I can categorize everything, to make it, because when you categorize things, they become easy. When you categorize things and you mention them in a categorical way, they become easy. And so he says, فَأَجَبْتُهُ إِلَى ذَلِكَ طَالِبًا لِلصَّوَابِ. He says, so I answered my friends by writing this book, right? طَالِبًا لِلصَّوَابِ, seeking reward. وراغبا إلى الله سبحانه وتعالى في التوفيق للصواب إنه على ما يشاء قدير وبعباده لطيف خبير. And with that we have covered the introduction of Matn Abu Shujaa, and in the next lesson of ours, insha'Allah ta'ala, we will go through the first chapter of the book, which is Kitab al-Tahara, the chapter on purification, or the book of purification. بإذن الله تعالى. بارك الله فيكم وجزاكم الله خيرا.